G'day folks. Alright, today I'm just going to go through a walkthrough of how to change the gearbox in your 09 Forester. So this one is the XT Forester and has the 4 EAT gearbox. That's the 4-speed automatic. Unfortunately the one in here has completely and utterly shit the bed, and it's going to have to come out, no way around it. Fortunately I have a spare, so we will get on with how to do that. And hopefully I can point out a few little tricks on how to do this in your own garage and do it relatively safely. Right. Okay, so we're going to try and get all of the engine bay parts done first before we lift the car up and then have to get under it and deal with that part. So we'll try and do this in 2 steps. All right, first things first, you're going to want to make sure that you disconnect your negative lead from your battery just to make sure that, you know, while it's up in the air and you're under it, no one tries to start it. That's kind of annoying. Okay, so disconnecting the battery, just get your shifter here. Right, this should be a 13mm socket. Loosen off the nut. Now, before you disconnect this, if you have a factory fitted stereo, there is a 4-digit safety pin that you need to know. So if you don't have that, before you disconnect this, you'd want to make sure you have that. If you don't have that code, you will brick that stereo and it will be useless. I don't have that problem. The stereo in here is aftermarket, so not an issue there. All right. What the? Oh, there we go. All right, disconnected. Okay, so there's now no risk of this thing starting for any reason whilst we're now working on it. Safe to start. Okay, so your next challenge is going to be removing the intercooler here, down at the top of the engine. Not too difficult. You're going to have to remove air hose here, and also it helps if you remove the hose from the brake booster back here. In terms of mounting bolts, you've got one here and 2 here, and then you've only got the 2 that support it. Hang on, come around. Yeah, so you got this one here and this one here. Keen eye observers will notice that that is not stock. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Okay, so to get these hoses off, it helps if you have pliers. Now, these are actually what you'd call glass breaking pliers. They're an Ipex thing. These ones are old as time, but they do a really, really good job of loosening off these hose clamps, especially the factory ones. Now that I've said that, I'm going to make this look really, really difficult. Okay. That's one. Right. This one just slips off like so. And again with the brake booster, same again. Get your pliers either side of the ears up, out of the way. Give it a good wiggle, and off she comes. And that is so you can pull it all the way, like so. So you're going to want to get all the way in there. Yeah, kind of forgot. Most Subaru bolts are actually metric even numbers, rare exceptions, odd numbers. So if it's not a 10mm, it's going to be a 12. Look at that. Where did that go? All right, and I'll play Go Fish with that other one in a minute. Okay, if you don't already have one of these in your arsenal, it's probably a good idea. This is just a magnetic telescopic pickup tool. Very handy. They come in handy when you are a numpty like me and drop bolts in strange places all the time. Yep, probably the best $3.50 I ever spent. And so you don't lose it, leave it there. Now while you're doing this, try not to get into the habit of putting everything up here next to your windscreen. Pretty surefire way, if you close this bonnet now for any reason, you're going to do yourself some damage. So get in the habit of putting your nuts and bolts and then your parts in an appropriate container. If I can find one, Oh, that'll work. There you go. So this is a good way to make sure that you don't lose any bolts. And it's also handy to find out how many bolts you have left over at the end of this little exercise. Not that you absolutely have to have one of these, but they do make life a lot easier. Little angle ratchets. Worth their weight in gold, especially if you're working on these things all the time. Right, so your next challenge is going to be to reach in here and get this Jubilee clamp there loose in order to disconnect this side of the intercooler. If you got the correct size socket to reach in there, all the better, but as you can see, just a flat blade screwdriver in this case will work just fine. There we go. Don't need to back it out all the way, just so it's loosey-goosey, so it'll slip off. All right, next part is removing these two bolts. This is the part where I regret my previous life choices. That is not an original bolt. So in the back here, this has been stripped out from being removed who knows how many times. So it's now a bolt on top, nut underneath. Excruciatingly difficult to get out. In your case, this should just be a regular bolt. Nice and easy. Same as this side. Important to note at this point that once we do take this intercooler off, what you're going to have here is a big hole that goes right into your turbocharger. Do not drop anything in there. That would be bad. And another one for the bucket. Yeet. Okay, so because this is my first time sort of doing this kind of thing on YouTube, I haven't yet invested in anything like a camera stand or anything, so I'm going to need two hands to do this next part. You won't, if you're not a dumbass like me and have put a bolt and a nut on this side of your intercooler. Okay, so after verbally abusing it and then getting a correct size socket on there, we can now take this off. Now just remember, do not drop anything down in here. Again, that goes straight to your turbo. That's not good. You'll also have to be careful not to damage down in there. Remember that Jubilee clamp that we have to undo? There it is. Be careful not to damage any of the rubber fittings down there as you lift this off. So you want to lift the whole intercooler back towards the windscreen and up, all in one sort of smooth motion. And once again, I will need two hands to do this, so bear with me in a sec. Okay, the intercooler is now out. You can see there's a nice big hole here. And where we need to get to here is down in here. Can you see that? So just where my finger is, there's a little access cover that we're going to have to take off. So you can see it's a bit tight, but that's what she said. We can reach in there, pull this out, assuming it doesn't crack. Come on. Oh, that's right, I used Sikaflex on that, didn't I? Twit. There it comes. So this is the little cover there. Yep, there's the Sikaflex. It's not much left of that actually. Probably need a new one of those. Anyway, what that does is it gives you access. Try and get this in here. No. You're gonna have to take my word for it because you can't really see it in the light there, but right dead center of the screen there now. All right, so that is actually the flex plate. And there are 4 bolts that we have to remove from the flex plate that go through to the torque converter. So a bit more of that in a second. Okay, so I've moved the work light now just so you can get a better view of it. So yeah, dead in the center of the screen there now, that is actually the flex plate in the bell housing there. So what we'll do next is we're going to bar the engine over, which isn't too hard to do by hand, just off the front pulley, till we can see one of the flex plate bolts. Okay, so trying to get that to focus. There we go. So you can just see again, dead center of the screen. I've turned the motor over and brought up one of the flex plate bolt heads there. You can just see. All right, so this is where it's going to start to get fiddly. You've got to be able to reach in there, loosen that bolt off. It is just a bolt. There's no nuts on the back of it, and be able to take it out of there without it dropping it down into the bell housing casing there. That is going to cause a nightmare if you do. So You've got to take your time with this. Just use a spanner, which would be 12 mil. Could be a 10, I'll double check, I'll get back to you. You're gonna loosen it off and then you're gonna undo it by hand, preferably. You do not want to drop that bolt down to the bell housing. Now, if you're a twit like me, you just realize that you really don't have enough room here between the garage door and the front of the car here, and you want to move it back. You kind of can't, because you've gone and disconnected the battery, and well, you're sort of working in here anyway. But there is a way to move it with this disconnected. So some people didn't know that you can't actually shift the car into neutral while there's no power to this battery. There's actually an interlock with the key, and you have to be at ignition or accessory, sorry, at least, in order to move this thing. So how do you get around that? Right, let me show you something. So some of you might know what I'm already about to do. All right, so again, with these automatics, there is a way to get them into neutral while dead. So normally you'd have to have key in the ignition here, foot on the brake, and then you can shift into neutral. But as you can see now, foot's on the brake, but it's not going to do anything because there's no key in the ignition. So what you're going to need to do is get yourself a little flat blade screwdriver here, pop open this little round inspection port, lose it because you just flicked it somewhere, and geez, who's know when that's going to turn up. No, found it. All right, and down in here where that little port was, there's a little release button. So if you push down on that, there she goes. All right, so she's now neutral. And foot on the brake. All right, so what I'm going to want to do is try and push this back. All right, so once you're done, just remember, put the car back into park. You will need to use your screwdriver in order to get in the little port there. Put your handbrake back on so she's not going to go anywhere. All right, now we can get back to work. And look at all the extra room I've got now. Now my fat ass will actually fit in there. Awesome. Okay, so something I should point out now, it's one of the issues you're going to have, is if you don't have the correct tool to actually lock onto the front pulley here at the front of the motor, anytime you try and undo these bolts in the torque converter, the whole motor's just going to try and bar over as you do it. So when you pull on your spanner or your shifter, the whole thing's just going to try and turn with it, and you're not going to be able to undo the bolt. So just be careful with it, a bit of persistence. Try and get the angle of the dangle, so to speak, with your ratchet so that you're bearing down on the bolt, not pulling across it. That way you'll actually get some leverage on it and be able to undo it without it just constantly moving the torque converter in place. Okay, so I've now got that first one just loose enough so that I can turn it with my fingers. Now, you don't want to take the first one all the way out, but rather you want to go in and loosen all 4 of them first. That way it'll just get a little bit easier towards the end. Just something I want to quickly point out, just be careful that when you're reaching in here and undoing these torque converter belts, don't mash that connector right there, so you can point at it with a thumb. That's kind of important. You do not want to fray, break, or damage those cables in any way, shape, or form. You'll be having a bad day if you do. So just be careful not to damage anything while you're scratching around down here. Okay, so that's all 4 of the torque converter bolts loosened off. Remember, I haven't taken them all the way out, just nice and loose. If you're having issues barring the engine over to get to each one of them, what you can do is put a 24mm socket on a ratchet, and just put that on the crank pulley bolt, and you can bar it over that way. It's a bit easier than just turning it by hands. You're less likely to get your finger caught under one of the belts as well when you're doing that. All right, so the next thing is to remove the dog bone, which is just over here. So that's the dog bone. Well, what its correct name is exactly, I couldn't tell you. That's what we call it. And you're going to want to remove it from this side first, and get that nut and bolt assembly out of there. This should be a 16mm by memory. Yep, 16. Come on. So, again, careful, don't drop anything down there or down here. So just don't drop anything in general. Put that in my pocket for now. Alright, and the dog bone should just move up and out of the way like so. Oh, she's a bit tight. I'm not supposed to do that, but it works. There we go. Yeah, so they do say that you're not supposed to use these as an actual breaker bar. All right, so don't grab it by the back and try and do overly tight bolts like that. That's generally a no-no. All right, so that's the dog bone loosened off. All right, and if you want, you can just tighten it back up and keep that up and out of the way, or just let it dangle like that, but that's fine. Or you can just take the dog bone out completely, just put the bolt back in there to support, so you don't lose it, and put the dog bone in your bucket of bolts. All right, so from here there's still a few things to do. One is the starter motor, so we need to disconnect all of this back here. So I'll take you through that. I think it's becoming obvious I have a caffeine problem. So tasty though. Okay, so now we need to get this starter motor out of the way. Now, there's a few things we're gonna have to take off. One is this earthing strap. Now, pro tip, don't go for this bolt here. Go for the one that's on the underside here, because that's actually part of the bell housing assembly. So that's actually quite a large bolt. So skip this one, go for the one under here. That's what's holding that tab on anyway. And then you've got two electrical connectors over the back here, and one more bell housing bolt hidden around the back here, so we're gonna have to get that out as well. So first one, will it fit? That's what she said. That heater hose is in just the wrong spot. Come on. No. Always use the right tool for the right job. Yeah, so there we go. So you can see that's one of the first of the bell housing bolts we're going to have to take out. And this little bolt here, yeah. Wonder why they did it that way. Why don't they just go straight to the block? Weird. By now you should have a healthy collection of bolts growing in your bucket, because, you know, you haven't been putting them on your windscreen. Yes. Okay, it's about this point that I realised that I've forgotten something, and that is using my fender covers, because when you're doing this kind of work, you're going to be leaning on this a fair bit. So if you actually give a rat's about your paint, well, as you can see, I kind of do, you're going to want to cover this up. So I've got these fender covers. Magnetic, so they don't fall off. I may have to blur that out, I don't know if they'll let me use that. Use your fender covers to make sure you don't scratch your paint. Other thing too, don't wear a belt. Metal belts will scratch your paint up really, really nicely. Alright, so to get this electrical connector off here, you're going to need a 12mm. Preferably just a ring spanner will do it. Just a bit easier than using the old ratchet. Once you loosen it off, it'll just come off your fingers. Get on there. Not quite. Yep, that's got him. Or not. Yes, there we go. Right. Another one for the bucket. And that will just, there goes the washer, straight under the floor. That's all right, I'll pick him up after this. All right, and there's one electrical connector hiding all the way down the back here. All right, so that should just unclip, because it's just a spade connector. Nothing tricky there. All right, so all it's holding your starter motor in place now is the one bolt down here on the underside. So next task, reach in there and get that out of there. All the way down in there. So it has actually just occurred to me that you don't need to take the starter motor out. You do need to take that top bolt off, which we already have done. because that is a bell housing bolt. But the one underneath here, that is actually a nut on a stud. So if you're really pressed, you could leave the starter motor there. It's going to come out with the gearbox. You will have to swap it over into the new one once you get to that stage. I'm going to take it off anyway, because, well, I said I was going to. Plus, I'm thinking it's probably going to be a little bit more wiggle room when we start to lower this out from under the car, because, yeah, it's a tight fit, folks, so you're going to want to, well, that's what she said, but it's going to be a tricky bit to get this out of here. Don't want that getting in the way and making things more difficult. Okay, so I've loosened off the nut at the back there, and as you can see, mine is practically already falling off. These can get stuck in here. Do not, if that happens, do not get tempted to try and stick a screwdriver or a pry bar or anything against these two aluminium castings. Not going to end well. If it is stuck, and it can happen, just a gentle tap on the back of the starter motor with like a wooden mallet or a wooden dowel, just to loosen it, just to break the corrosion away. That'll get it out 99% of the time. The last thing you want to do is try and pry this off. You will damage both parts of the casting, and then you're really up the creek. Starter motor in the box. All right, so next up is to disconnect all of these electrical connectors here at the back. Now, just a word of warning, be careful. If these have been exposed to any kind of heat for a long period of time, it's quite likely, given that there's a turbocharger right next to it, they can be brittle, so just be wary of that. Take your time, make sure that you're actually disengaging any of the locking clips correctly and completely before you start yanking on the cables. Be sure that you actually grip up on the connector itself, not the cables. There's always a good chance that you could tear a cable or a pin out of one of the plugs. It's not how you want to end your day. And yeah, again, just go slow, do it right. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is start making a bit more room down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo this nut here, or this bolt, sorry, that actually holds the dipstick tube in place. This is just going to give us a bit more room when we actually go to lower this out of the car. So again, this will just be a 14mm socket's fine, ring spanner just as good. Get in there, loosen it off. It will probably be tight because that is actually what holds the bell housing and the midsection of the gearbox together. Don't stress. Get that sucker out of there, and then we can wiggle the dipstick tube out. All right, so with that bolt removed, just one good wiggle, and your whole dipstick will come out in the tube complete, in the box. So now I need to get these two bell housing bolts out of here. You can see there's one there, center of frame, and there's one there now. It's square under the turbo. That one under the turbo, that's going to be fiddly. If your gearbox has been in here for a while, it's probably going to be stuck. So if you can, take your time with that one, bit of WD-40, CRC, whatever preferred penetrant. Get in there, let it soak, and then try and bring it out. This just shows you how much of a close fit it is to get to that bolt under the turbo. So if you don't have one of these deep sockets, 14mm, probably worthwhile getting your hands on one, or borrow one, steal one if you have to, just to get this part done, because you do not want to risk rounding off the top of that bolt. And you can see I've now got that bolt out, the one directly under the turbo, and the one next to it's now gone. Keen eye observers notice I've also taken the bracket off that was here. No, it's not attached to the gearbox, but it does give you a little bit more room here. So any more room we can make, all the better. All right, so now we can start taking the bolts out of the torque converter off and the flex plate. So remember, there's only 4 of them. Again, you're gonna have to do this slowly. Do not drop any of those bolts into the bell housing. That is not gonna end well. And as you go, you're gonna have to bar the engine over. Now, if you struggle to do that by hand off the crank pulley, just get a 24mm socket onto the front there and you can bar it over. Remember to bar it over in a clockwise direction, so that's actually putting tension on that crank pulley bolt. You do not want to loosen that bolt off. If you do that and you don't realize, again, once you put this all back together and go to drive it, you might have a bad day. So always bar the engine over in a clockwise direction. All right, so I've chickened out. I put the ratchet on the front pulley there. It's actually a 22mm, sorry, it's not a 24. And now slowly but surely undoing the torque converter bolts that are attached to the flex plate. Again, take your time, do this slowly. Do not drop this into the bell housing. And there's one of them. So you can see they're not very big. Should come out by hand. And yes, that is a Disney princess band-aid on my thumb because, you know, I don't have regular band-aids and I'm a sook. Now that's everything you can do from this side. Now we need to get the car up in the air on jack stands so we can do the underside. Now I'm deliberately not going to show you how to do that. Reason being is that this is sort of a very safety critical point. You do not want to get it wrong trying to lift the car up in the air. So please go read your vehicle owner's manual or your service manual and follow its instructions on how to get your car up on jack stands to the letter. This is one of those safety things you do not want to muck around with. So do it the right way the first time and do it safely. All right, so now she's up in the air on stands. And as you can see, it's a pretty healthy lift to get her all the way up there. Now I'll show you why you have to get this thing so far up in the air. All right, so here's the transmission we're swapping in. All right, now so from floor to the top of the bell housing is about 17 inches, 17 and a half, or 440 mil in the metric scale. You come over to the car. All right, so from floor to the underside of the sill here, and you can see there, it's pretty damn close. So that's pretty much the lowest part there is the actual, that seam on the sill there. So you can see it's about 470. So that really doesn't give you much room. Again, I deliberately have not told you how to lift the car up to this point. Again, please read your vehicle owner's manual in how to do this. All right. If you get anything wrong putting an engine back together again, you may junk an engine. But if you get lifting a car up like this wrong, you can, well, end up not alive. So please make sure you do this safely. Thank you, eBay. Well, can't make it any worse, I guess. Okay, so the car is now up in the air. As I was saying before, I deliberately didn't show you how to do this. Reason being is that if you get this wrong, you will unalive yourself very quickly. So please read your vehicle owner's manual on how to lift up your car. Now, what do I do with that tape measure? Didn't seem like a Subaru. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly show you why you need to lift the car up to this absolutely ridiculous height. All right, so here we have the gearbox that we're swapping in. Trusty tape measure. So that's from the floor, which is what the oil pan's sitting on. And you can see there, she's sitting at about 440 mil tall. All right, once you remove that bracket, that doesn't have to go in. But what we did then need to look at is all right, so you can see from the lowest point of the sill there at the seam, right? So that's about 450, give or take. So it really doesn't leave you much wiggle room. Right? So when you lift up the car, you're gonna have to make sure that from the floor up to that sill, you have at least this much of a gap. All right, so here we are under the car, and before we can take that gearbox out, there's a fair bit we have to get out of the way. First things first, it will be the exhaust. So everything from the flange here at the cat and back will have to come out all the way up to the resonators, and also the prop shaft. So it will be disconnecting from the rear diff, so far end that way. That will have to be disconnected, and then the prop shaft dropped out, including the mid flex joint just here as well. So fair bit to get on with, so let's hop to it. Just a hint, if you're doing anything to do with your exhaust, these nuts will generally be rusted up pretty badly just from heat cycling. So a quick spray with your favorite lubricant, and just give it a minute to sit. generally make this next part a little bit easier. This is the part where I probably remove a bit of skin. Oh, that's one. Crap. Alright, note to yourself, do not put camera right in the way. Oh, that slipped off. Alright. If you're really struggling with these nuts, one of these sockets that has only 6 sides, I'll put a picture of it shortly, can really make sure that you don't actually strip these off. The multi-point sockets are really good at rounding off nuts. Alright, so with those two done, you now need to move up to this hanger here. See that? Yep. So you want to loosen this one off as well. So with these two taken out, and this hanger bolt here taken out, you don't want to attack the flex joint here just yet. What you're going to want to do is go to the back and undo the 4 bolts that'll hold up either side of your last 2 resonators. So we'll move to the other end and get those out. So we're at the back of the car now, and here we got the last 2 resonators. So you're going to undo these 2 bolts here, and these 2 here as well. Alright, then I brought the torch with you now so you can see what I'm sort of doing. And after 10 minutes of trying to find the 14 mil, I realised it was right behind me, so that makes a heap of difference. Oops. So these ones generally aren't too bad. The WD-40 will help. Just knock them out one by one. Make sure you don't lose them. Okay, so both the resonators are now disconnected. So what we can do is we can move back up to the middle section, disconnect the flex joint, and then come back down to this end and remove this whole section from the rubber hanger, which is just behind the corner here. Yep, so once you get these 2 undone here, you're then going to want to go back and remove the rubber hanger, which is just up in the corner here. All right, so I've just about undone the slip joint. I've left one bolt in there loosely for now. Again, both of the bolts are undone at this end, and the hanger bolt has been removed. Before we can take this out, we've got to disconnect the O2 sensor from inside the cat. So just up here, got the clip, so it'll just be forward or just inside or behind, sorry, the cross member here. Make sure you push down on the clip, pull back, and then your O2 sensor will come away. So that'll just hang loose now. Pull it through, make sure it's not actually bound up anywhere. There we go. All right, so this section is now ready to come out. Yep, so this whole section should just now lift up, get it off the hanger, just sliding forward, and out she comes. Easy peasy. Just be mindful when you undo that last bit. This rear section here, it's only been held up by the hanger, so it's going to want to drop down and try and crack you in the skull. So maybe be careful of that. All right, so off camera there, I had a bit of a struggle getting this exhaust hanger off the car side of it. Now, these little buggers, they can get pretty brittle and tight, and you may need to dump a bit of WD-40 onto these things to loosen them off. Generally, it's easy to get it from the car side rather than the actual exhaust pipe side. But again, bit of WD-40, it should slip off. All right, so with the exhaust out of the way, we're now onto the prop shaft. There's 2 points here we have to deal with. Here where the prop shaft meets the rear diff, and also here at the midpoint. Can you see that if I adjust? All right. That's pretty easy, it's just 2 bolts and that's not a big deal. With the prop shaft though, it's a little bit more tricky. So I'll just talk you through it. There's 4 bolts and 4 nuts to go with washers. It's really important to make sure that you put these back exactly how you find them. Now, the easy way to do that is just to mark the bolts, the nuts, and the flange face uniquely, so you know which is which. So you can see that I've already put marks on these ones from a previous time I've had to do this, so pretty easy. But just a white paint marker or a permanent marker, something that's indelible and something that will show easily under the dirt. So you can actually put these back exactly how you found it. That is really important for the balancing of the prop shaft. Alright, so I don't know if the camera's going to show this, but You can see here I've marked on the actual uni joint on the prop shaft, little black X. On the bolt that matches that, there's also another X, and then here on the differential pinion face there's another black X. And if you turn the shaft, same again, black square, black square, black square. Black dash, dash, and dash. And same up here, I'm just going with a little V. So make sure that you're actually marking the uni joint on the prop shaft, the bolt face, and the actual face of the differential. This way you can make sure that everything goes back together the way it came apart, which is super critical for the balance and preventing vibration. Now what I also have is a couple of plastic bags marked with corresponding marks here. Right, so when I take one of these out, I put it into the correct bag, and that way I know that the bolt, the nut, and the washer are the correct ones. Should also mention when you're undoing these, it helps if you have the park brake or the handbrake on. Otherwise, this is just going to flop around in the breeze. So best tool for a job for this is going to be a 12mm ring spanner. They should come apart reasonably easily. Yep, there's one. So that is my dash marked bolt, nut and washer assembly. That will go in the dash bag right now. Yep, so can't lose it. And you know which one it is. Do that 3 more times and we're good. I wonder what normal non-car people do on days like this. Like, if you're not working on a car, like, what are you doing all weekend? Alright, so at some point you're going to get the first 3 out, and then you're not going to be able to reach the one at the top, so you're going to have to get out from under the car, back in the car, take the handbrake off, turn the prop shaft by hand so you can get to the last one, get out, put the handbrake back on, and then get back in here so you can undo the last one. You know, it's not tedious enough. Okay, so all the bolts are out at the rear here, and now we're going to move to the midsection here. Now, just be wary, once you take these 2 out, there's nothing to stop this whole assembly from coming down and meeting you halfway. So just be careful of that. Also, it's good to put your oil pan here, so just whatever you've got, underneath where the slip joint is here, where it goes into the rear of the transmission. It's not unusual for a bit of oil to leak out of that as you withdraw it, so just be careful with that. Try and prevent the mess before it happens. Alright, again, this is going to require 2 hands to get this done, so I'll try and set up so you can watch what I'm doing. If I get this wrong, at least I'll have an interesting story to tell the nurse at the hospital. Oop, careful. Okay, just carefully sliding out off the back of the transmission. Yep, a little bit of oil coming out. That's to be expected. Easy as. Just a little hint for if you're ever doing this, it pays to get 2 snap lock bags, just the small ones you use for, like, you know, a sandwich or something like that, and 2 cable ties. Double bag the end of the transmission here, throw 2 cable ties around it so they can't slip off. So when we go to take this out, if we do tip it over, we don't get a sudden rush of transmission oil flowing out of here all over your nice clean floor. So double bag, and it'll seal it up. It's also good if you're planning on reusing this transmission. It'll stop any sort of dirt or foreign objects getting stuck up in the tail here. Okay, so the next job we're going to do is disconnect the shift linkage from the gearbox itself. So if you look up in here, you got a little snail clip, which you just undo and then send it flying into the abyss. We'll come back to that later. Slip that off, and that's the linkage done. Just kidding. Okay, now there's two more. You've got two bolts here, one here, one here. Right, you gotta disconnect those, and then the whole shift of linkage comes away from the gearbox, and you're done. Just so I happen to have a 14mm ring spanner on me, so that's one I'm going to use. I did mention that this gearbox is dead. It turns out I probably didn't realize just how badly. So looking up in here, so we've got the driver's side CV, and you can see that there's a little bit of oil dripping out of that oil seal there. Oil is generally yellow, not aluminium grey. So whatever's going on inside there is not good. But I suppose once we get out of here, we can take her apart and see what's actually happened. All right, so the next part of this is going to need us to take these CV joints out on both sides. Now, before you do that, you're going to want to drain out the oil out of the front diff here, otherwise it's just going to go everywhere. So if you don't already, you're going to need one of these. It's a T70 or a Torx driver. They're not going to be in your standard socket set, that's for sure. That said, you can pick these up relatively cheaply, either on your preferred online shopping site, not one that I have a problem with, or you can get them from your auto parts store. But just be warned that these can be tight, and being that it's aluminium, you want to go slowly. All right, this is probably going to require two hands. Okay, so I just broke that sump plug loose off camera, and if I'm right about my little theory here, what's about to come out of this is going to be absolutely horrific. Also very messy. Come on. Actually not that bad. I was expecting a lot worse. Interesting. Alright, so you probably can't see it, but I've got up in here, that's the, damn it, get the light right. So there's the front differential drain, and I'm going to put my finger in it, and if you listen closely, yeah, that should not be in there. That is gear teeth floating around in there. Chunky bits of metal floating around inside your diff. Not good. Oh dear. So after a bit of scratching around in the drain hole, this is what we found. So that is definitely a gear tooth, and it's sheared clean off. So whatever happened, it was spectacular. And there's more of these in there still. So that has well and truly had it. So now the oil's drained out of the differential, now we can move on to actually getting rid of these two CV shafts. And really just praying to God that they themselves are not chewed up as the internals of this gearbox, because, oh geez, there is some chunky bits in there. Okay, so just a little sound check. I'm gonna spin the driver's side tyre here and you can hear what's going on. So definitely front differential failure or center diff failure. Luckily I have a spare gearbox there, so we can sort this out pretty easily. Alright, so now we need to get these CV joints out. Now, to get the room that we need in order to be able to pull these CVs out, we're going to have to move this whole hub assembly out of the way. Right, so in order to do that, there's a few things we're going to disconnect. Right, first of all, you've got your anti-sway bar up forward. Right, so we're going to need to disconnect the sway bar link here. And the other thing we need to disconnect is the lower control arm ball joint, which is just here. You can see mine are pretty cooked anyway. Yuck. Alright, so I've got spares of this, so I will be replacing these as we go. Now, I've already sprayed these with WD-40 just to try and help loosen them up. Just be warned, these suckers have a bad habit of spinning on the nut, so they're a nightmare to undo. There is a socket here at the front, so you're supposed to be able to put an Allen key in here to stop the bolt from turning as you try and undo the nut. But they generally rust out, and they just end up doing a big round circle and achieving nothing. So, word of caution, have spare ones of these on hand if you can. I know I can get these undone because I've undone them recently, so they should still be good. Worst case scenario, a set of multi-grips or needle nose pliers at the back here can give you the grip you need just to undo the nut and get it off the bolt. Alright, so another thing to mention too is when we take this assembly off, you need to be really careful of up here. Can you see that? Yes. Up here we have the speed sensor for this wheel hub. All right. Be super careful around this. It's quite fragile. If you break this, you're having a bad day, because to replace it is not easy. You do not want to add that to your list of things to do. So be very careful. When we start moving this hub around, do not overstretch this cable up here. All right, that's critical. All right, I'm gonna grab some tools and we'll get stuck into it. Okay, I got kind of lucky here because the nut and bolt for the sway bar link, that came out quite easily, and so did the one for the lower ball joint. And I've already gone ahead and just prized that out of there, and you can now see that the lower cup, it's there in center of frame now. So that's the cup that's going to come down and out of the hub assembly there once that bolt's loosened off. Again, I'm going to be replacing that. That looks absolutely trash. So now the trick's going to be just to push that down and out of the way, and then we can get on to actually removing the CV joint from the gearbox. Okay, so I've got that lower ball joint out of the way, sitting there, and then now you've got to reach in, grab the CV joint from up at the gearbox end and start giving it a gentle nudge. Now, if you can't get it out of there, you can pry it out, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so to just pop the CV joint out of the gearbox, there is a circlip that holds it in, but just a gentle wiggle will just pop it loose, and that's it, just like that. So that's already now sprung out, which is kind of alarming because it shouldn't have been that easy. Hopefully there's something left. Okay, so this normally becomes a bit of a struggle, but once it's been popped free, you should be able to just pull the whole snout out of the differential, but you're gonna have to pull the wheel hub assembly out with it. Oh, she's tight. There we go. Yeah, this is where it gets fiddly because this needs somewhere to go, where it's not going to hang up on the gearbox when we start to lower it out. And being mindful again of, hello. Right, so this has to go somewhere. So you've got to sort of push the hub out with one arm and then pull this up. Oh, that'll do. Right, so you can see there the CV. End's just floating there now. And there's a bit of glitter on the end of that. But luckily the splines and the circlip look pretty healthy. So at least this side, we got away with it. So yeah, I'm not going to show you doing this on the other side, right? It's just repeat the exact same process. So I'll quickly get over there, do the other side, and then we'll have both CV joints out. Just while I wait for the rain to settle down so you can hear what I'm saying, just a quick one. If you want the wheel hub to stay in one position while you're working on it, remember you can lock the steering wheel. You put the keys in the ignition, put it to accessories only, turn the steering wheel to the position you want it to be, then take the keys out and give it a quick wiggle and it will lock out. That's the security function. But it also means that the hub locks in that position. So use that to your advantage if you need to. Okay, so we're getting closer now. There's still a few things we have to do. One of the little things you want to do is take this bracket off here. So there's just 2 bolts up here behind the cross member. Should be 10, so show 14 or 12 mil. Just take this off. It will make life a bit easier because it does sit lower than the pan. Secondly, also we have to remove the cooling line hoses, preferably from the box itself. So you'll just see where the 2 transmission cooling hoses meet the block, the gearbox there. So you have to disconnect it from there. And lastly, we start working on the bell housing bolts, which is where it gets a little fiddly. That said, with the CV joints out, it's actually a little bit easier. So, pro tip, take these out before you try and do the lower bell housing bolts, because these things just get in the way. Okay, so the bracket's off. Now we're going to move on to these 2 transmission cooling line hoses here. You can see the clips for them just up here. Again, you're going to use your favourite pair of pliers and you're going to just disconnect them, simple as. Now, make sure that you have drain pan ready to go, because that is going to leak oil. Not a big deal, because you know we bought 4 litres of oil just in case, right? Yeah, so just get in there with your pliers onto the clip. Wiggle the clip back out of the way. Got to move them back a fair ways too, because the spigots coming off this are actually pretty long. There we go. So you can see I've shifted that clip from like all the way over here. So that's a bit of a move, because the pipe is about there. And then once you got that loose, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Alright, now just make sure you know exactly where your drain pan is, because again, this is likely to make a mess. You can sort of slip your thumb over the end of it as it comes off. I should limit that. Got him. Let go. Straight in. It's a little dark. Not the end of the world though. Alright, so shouldn't be too much. Depending on which end you've disconnected. So I think that's the high side. That's what we just took off. So the low side will probably drain a bit more than that. And same again on the second hose. Just twist it and pull at it, and then get your thumb over the end of it before it runs out everywhere. Aim for the pan and let it go. No, not on me. Okay, the concerning thing is that not even 100, maybe not even 500 k's ago, that transmission fluid, that was brand new. And now it looks well and truly burnt. There was something really not wrong with this thing. I'm sorry, something really not right with it. I've double bagged and zip tied the transmission cooling lines as well, just so that there's no chance that any dirt or anything else sort of gets into those hoses, because that's going to be a surefire way to blow up your next transmission, if you're like me. And it's also to stop this from leaking on your head, because you can be down here for a little bit longer. Speaking of, it might be a good idea at this point just to wipe things down, just so that if there is any oil still dripping anywhere, that you don't end it up in your face, or worse, in your eyeballs, because that sucks. Yep, it's just a quick touch up just to make sure there's nothing here that's going to fall down your face. Alright, we're on the home stretch, so we're onto the belly housing bolts. Just trying to get them into frame. Alright, so there's 2 of them. You can see through that gap. Alright, so you've got one at the top, one here about halfway, and just below that, you see through the gap there? Alright, so there's a stud with a nut on it. So that's passenger side, if you get those out. Not too hard on the passenger side, actually there's plenty of room there once that starter motor's out of the way. Driver's side, it's a little fiddlier, but luckily there's only now one left on this side because we've already got the other ones. Just trying to get them in frame. Yep, so there in the center of the shot there, and just below it, you can see that there, just past the CV joint. So there's your nut on the stud. So now the preference here is to take the bolts out, leave the studs to last, and then we'll loosen those off. We'll loosen the studs, and then we'll start looking at getting the trans jack in here, and then doing the transmission rear mount. Okay, so I've taken all of the bolts out, and I've backed out the nuts on the studs back to their last thread, and that's just to give us a sort of safety gap. So when we actually start to pull the transmission back, we don't want it just to fly out, so we want to use this as like a positive stop. And I've done the same on the opposite side as well. So back these out all the way, so they're just like flush like that, and it leaves you a nice healthy gap on the stud. Right. It's just a bit of a safety step. Okay, so we're at the point now where we can actually start loosening off the rear transmission support, which is across back here. So it's got the trolley jack in position. It's just supporting the weight of the transmission. So you jack it up and you just bring it up until you can just start to see it move. Right? That way you know you've got the weight. We're now going to go around the other end and start removing all of those transmission cross member bolts. Just a point, when you do this, make sure that the pad for your jack is not going to hit anything. These will become a pest when we start to try and lower it out, but initially we'll be going back to clear these, and then down and then out. Alright, so here we are at the other end again. Alright, so step one is going to be to remove these 3 transmission bolts here, or the ones that support the transmission directly up to the flexible mount. And then we're going to disconnect these 3 on each side. So start at the center. Good as any. Don't lose this donut. You're gonna need that. so as I undid that, the transmission actually moved up a little bit. That's a good sign that there's plenty of weight being supported by the trolley jack, which is what you want. Which means that these three should come out just fine. Okay, so I've got it down to the last 2 bolts here and here. Right, as you undo them, you're going to have to hold this up because this will fall down on your face. And the fact that the transmission has now not fallen down tells you that the trolley jack is doing exactly what it's supposed to. Alright, last chance. You have to go around and make sure that you have undone everything. I'm going to double check everything myself. Strongly advise that you do the same. This is now when you need to make sure that all your connectors are off, all your hoses are disconnected, every bolt is off the belt housing, everything has to be loose. We still have the 2 nuts on the studs. We'll take those off now, and then we can start actually moving the transmission off the back of the motor. Okay, so I came up here just to make sure I've got all of these connectors removed, and interestingly, I can see the parting line here between the bell housing and the motor is already started to open up, so that's a good sign. If you didn't see that, just a quick up down on the trolley jack underneath should just wiggle the transmission up and down, and that should open up. So if you're seeing this, that's a good sign. If this doesn't happen and it seems like this is stuck, go through, double check that you've actually removed all of the bolts. The worst thing you can do is try and smash a pry bar or a screwdriver in here to try and pry it apart. Now, the casting on the back of the motor here, especially in this location here, is quite thin and brittle. So if you smash a pry bar in here, you're going to crack the back out of the block here. I've seen motors junk doing that, so resist the temptation to use force. All right, it will come in time, just coerce it out of there. And do not use any pinch bars, pry bars, screwdrivers for anything other than screwdrivers. Okay, so moment of truth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up gently on the jack, and I'm going to have to slide it backwards towards the rear of the car. So remembering those 2 studs at the bottom end of the bell housing, they're about 2 inches, maybe even 3 inches longer than what you can actually see. So this actually needs to go a fair way back before we can actually slide it off those 2 studs. So I'll come up. Wiggle, wiggle. Come down a bit. So you don't want to come down too far. Okay, so I managed to break it away from the back of the motor there, but it was a little sketchy than I'd hoped. So by coming up and down on the jack, wiggle left to right, and then ultimately the almighty foot to push it off the back of the motor. It's not ideal, but progress is progress. So it's still on the motor. Whoop. I do believe we just cleared something. And so a quick check from above, and you can see that we have cleared both of those stud bolts. And for all intents and purposes, this is now disconnected from the motor. Now the challenge is to actually working with the space that we've got left, move this back and then lower it down onto the floor. See, like I was saying before, this is where it gets fiddly because we're going to have to clear these CV shafts still. You can see that one there. This one over here, right? So they're actually in the way. So as we lower it down, we're going to have to manipulate those so that it doesn't actually cause an interference. We still need to go back a ways because we're still actually sitting just above this cross member. So we need to keep moving back a bit and then down. And so shift this back. Alright. So, a bit of a shove. Down a bit. Whoop. Sound of vomiting. Okay. Now, if memory serves, you should be able to push this up and out of the way. Okay, just a real quick important point. As you're taking this out, you need to be careful that the torque converter itself, which is in the bell housing, doesn't slip forward off the spline shaft. That's going to cause a heck of a mess. So as we're coming down, you're just going to make sure that that's still sitting fully recessed back on the gearbox. I'm spitting chips now because I just realized the camera wasn't rolling as I lowered that bit out for the last second there, but there it is. The transmission is no longer in the car. Heavy bastard. And I had the center of gravity of this thing completely wrong. The front differential cover here needs to be touching the jacking pad because this thing is really, really front heavy. So when you do this, I managed to balance it with my hand as it's coming down, but make sure that this part here is on the jacking pad as well. Otherwise she's just going to tip forward every time you do this. Hopefully you don't have to do this too often anyway. Okay, I wish I'd caught those last 15 minutes on film because this would have been hilarious. So, gearbox fell off the stand, off the trolley jack, and then started to leak transmission fluid everywhere. So quickly rolled it over, cleaned it up, and started dragging it out. In the process of doing that, the sump plug for the front diff unwound itself, it must have been scratching across the ground, and then dumped diff oil everywhere on the ground. And in the chaos of doing that, my phone fell in that. So kudos to the guys who designed iPhones. If they can go for a swim in that crap and survive, I'm impressed. So, the transmission is out. I really hope that things go a bit more smoothly for you folks. Now, one thing to take away, when the transmission is on the trolley jack, it's going to be too tall to get past any of the cross members or the sills. So you're going to have to, by some means, get this off whatever you used to lift it up. Get it down on the ground and just skull drag it out of there. There's no two ways around it. If I had a lower, sort of slimmer trolley jack, this may not have been a problem, but what I've got is what I've got. So, but there it is. That is one 4EAT transmission on the floor, not in the car, and done relatively safely, if messily, but done nonetheless. Alright, so some key takeaways from this. Alright, obviously the height of your trolley jack versus your stands. Alright, you need to get that dialed in. Having the car higher off the ground. Alright, so right now I just don't quite have the clearance, and you can see I'm already using car stands at their full height plus 2 pavers there. So that's probably giving me an extra 4 inches or 3.5 inches ish, and it's still not enough to get the transmission out in one piece. So something to think about. Also making sure that the drain plug for this diff is all the way back in before you try and skull drag this out. Yeah, a few lessons learnt there, but the job is done. It has been removed. All is to do now is to try and clean up this disaster, and we can start working on installing the new one. That will be fun. The challenge will be to get the new transmission onto the trolley jack whilst it's still under the car. So that's going to require at least 2, probably 3 of us actually to do that. So at this point, yes, you can get it out, but no, you're not doing this by yourself moving forward. In due course, I will do a bit of a tear apart / autopsy on what actually killed this thing. I've done a bit of digging online. There's no sort of smoking gun causes at this stage. Yeah, it just is what it is, I guess. But again, make sure this doesn't fall out while you're doing it. It will make a tragic mess, as it did all over my concrete floor. I think that's about it for this evening. All right, thanks for your attention. I am going to go have a beer or a few before I have to go to work tomorrow morning, which is Monday. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.